Varmt välkomna till denna intervju med OssDsigns VD Morten Henneveld. Det har hänt otroligt mycket i bolaget på kort tid och vi ska nu få äran att intervjua Morten. Very welcome to Pencil Studio.
Oh, thank you very much, Peter.
There has been some substantial news flow now from the company. You've done a fairly large strategy shift or update, and you also performed a successful directed share issue. Please start initially and elaborate a bit around the strategy shift within the company. You know, why are you doing this?
Yeah, no, I think for us it seems very natural. As you know, we acquired Sirakoss back in 2020. It was only a technology. We commercialized it in late 21. Since then, things have just grown exceptionally fast. The growth trajectory has gone at a level where actually in Q2 of this year, it became the biggest franchise, roughly about, in reality, 18 months after launch. And it has had an absolute transformative impact on the company. After the last quarter, we also disclosed gross margins and showed that we have increased 30 percentage points from 46% in 2020 and now to reporting 77% in the second quarter, virtually all down to Catalyst. So we see value creation right now coming from our orthobiologics business, and we certainly see that also going forward. So this new strategy is a direct result of that. We see that we can create substantially more shareholder value going forward by operating only in the orthobiologics business. It's a very large market. It's $1.8 billion. It has very solid underlying growth here by a number of, I would say, trends and a move towards synthetic material. It's fully scalable. It has 90% or even above gross margin. We'll be able to operate the company with a much lower OPEX. So, you know, combined, this mathematically should mean better operating leverage and therefore an accelerated time to cash flow positive. Then, of course, what we tied it together with the launch of a extremely successful directed share issue, which, of course, we went above our mandate because of the demand. And I also take that as really a vote of confidence and a support to the new strategy that investors really see how substantial this can be for shareholder value in the months and quarters and years to come.
Please do now, I mean, you basically becoming a US marketing company. Explain for our investors the market dynamics in the US market concerning a product such as a high gross margin product, novel, innovative product. Please outline a bit about the market dynamics.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the orthobiologics market is big. It's $1.8 billion. It's growing at about 8%. There are different ways you can solve in this. You can use what's called autograft, using the patient's own bone. You can use allograft, that's a donor-based product, or you can use synthetic products. What you see right now is that synthetic products are outperforming the other ones in general. So there is a shift towards synthetic products, but it is an exceptionally crowded market. Technically, there are close to 400 clearances as such, broadly defined, in the synthetic bone graft market to deal with that. So there are many products out there on the market. There are also an exceptional amount of old products on the market. And I think this is where we are well positioned because, you know, we are treating spinal degeneration, right, which is an age-driven thing, and our patients are typically plus 60 years old, and that is growing. We are seeing surgeons being increasingly concerned about allograft because of the risk of transmittive diseases, which means that they are now moving more increasingly to synthetics solutions. And last but not least, we see a big shift away from the early technologies. There are products out there that have been launched 20-25 years ago who are clearly not showing the same efficacy as the latest generation are. So we're also seeing that. So we are exceptionally well positioned in that market. Then, of course, what happened last Monday elevated us from being one in many in that crowd to being one in very, very few in the entire US marketplace that has a what's called an interbody clearance. This is not something we've talked a lot about to anyone for competitive reasons. We've wanted to stay very much under the radar. We did not want anyone to even get the slightest hint that we were trying to get this clearance. But what it means is that OssDsign Catalyst is now one of very few that is actually cleared for unlabeled use in all major spine surgeries. It has been a known fact that what's called the interbody, which is a cage. So in the spine, you typically use screws and rods, but you also use a cage. And until recently, no one has, it's all been off-label uses. No one has had an unlabeled use of that. So we are exceptionally well positioned, and of the three that actually only have the clearance, the other two are old technologies. We are the only latest technology product. So right now, if you believe that the latest technology products are the best, which all data indicate, and you also want to use it on label for all your spine procedures, then actually it's only Catalyst in the marketplace. So we went from, I would say, one in many with a really good story, good preclinical data, exceptional handling qualities, and a really good, I would say, science story behind it, showing bone growth, lots of bone growth and fast bone growth. But we were still one in many, and now suddenly we belong to this elite category of synthetic bone grafts. So yes, an exceptional amount of things have happened in the last week, but I would say it's all just confirming that this is the way the company needs to go. This is what will create value for shareholders.
Let's elaborate a bit on the, which you recently told the market that you had an FDA approval to use Catalyst in combination with interbody cages. As I understand, so far physicians or orthopedicians or surgeons, if you want to call them that, have used that off-label, and you are the only your product is the only one they can use on-label now. Why is that so important?
Well, there's technically two others as well, but I think what was interesting is that they actually went in with clinical data on 75 patients and using their spinal cage data, where our clearance was given solely on the bone graft itself and the data from the preclinical, right? So that is that in itself. To answer your questions, well, it is because every time a product is used off-label, right? And it does happen frequently in the US market. But every time that happens, it means there is a risk for the surgeon and the hospital should something go wrong, right? Because we cannot promote to use it, even though we know that generally on other products and so on, they tend to do that. So it carries a risk every time you use a product off-label. Now, if you're on label, then you eliminate that risk for the surgeon and for the hospital, right? And then, of course, I would say the other thing is, if you have two products, let's say OssDsign Catalyst and a competitor product, and you think they're probably equally good fundamentally, right? One doesn't have to be better than the other, but one is you have to use off-label, and the other one you have to use on-label. Then why wouldn't you choose the product that is on label, right? So it's way too early to speculate what this means for sales acceleration and that trajectory. We certainly believe that it will allow us to get more hospital approvals. We also believe that it's going to drive some more usage of the product where we're already approved. And of course, we also expect that this, by being in this elite category now suddenly of synthetic bone graft, that this allows us to keep our price levels or maybe even get slightly better price levels, right? But I would say it's still too early days. We are not expecting just to flick on a switch and then sales just triples overnight. That's not what we think will happen. So we're a little bit in a wait and see, but of course, we don't know if there will be other companies coming. There probably will be. There are other companies that probably have data where they can also go for clearance now that we've shown the regulatory pathway for them. So we think there is a window, but we also think that there are many companies out there in the marketplace today, as you know, that have not invested in clinical data, that don't have strong enough preclinical data, that probably will never get an interbody clearance, right? So I think mid to long term, we are probably expecting some kind of tiering of the market where we are extremely well positioned to be in the tier 1 category.
Turning towards, I mean, you have outstanding preclinical data supporting your product, and we can anticipate the propelled registry, which is fully recruited by now. Am I correct?
That was the Top Fusion is fully recruited.
Yeah, Top Fusion fully recruited, and then you have the registry ongoing. So we can anticipate some clinical data also being available this year or beginning
No,
of next
it
year?
will be, I mean, if you take our Top Fusion first, those patients are now coming up, or they have moved beyond their 12 months, so they are being assessed and data is collected, and we expect a publication on that in the first half of next year. We also have in Propel, you know, first patient came in a little more than a year ago, so we now have patients coming up to 1 year, which is kind of the gold standard for when you assess fusion rates in our line of business. So we expect 24 to be clinical data, right? But I think that's also how you need to see OssDsign, right? We started in 21. It takes time to get into the hospital. Around summertime, about a year ago, we started to see acceleration in sales. Now we're seeing in Q2 in particular a very sharp acceleration again. We've got into the bigger hospitals. Then we overlay that with a quite extraordinary clearance, right, where we become an elite category synthetic bone graft, and then next year we start to come out with more clinical data, right? So I think that's the way you should be looking. It's like building blocks, right? We keep building the blocks as we move forward. This is our game plan, and it seems to be working really well so far.
And also outline a bit about the putty in itself. As I understand from your presentations, physicians come back and say, I mean, it's ease of use. Yeah. Can you describe why are they ease of use for the product?
Well, I think there's two things on the product, right? As we said, and that was fundamentally why we acquired Sirakoss in 2020. The preclinical data we saw, which was actually tested in this Bowden model, which is a very discriminating, very difficult preclinical model, was just outstanding. We've never seen preclinical data so good. So that resonates extremely well. But then you have the handling qualities, and I actually, you know, in one of the presentation here at Pensa, I actually demonstrated it live because handling is important in the sense that, you know, we deliver the bone graft in a syringe. Most surgeons will take it out and they will mix it with maybe the patient's own bone or blood or things of that nature. And then you have to place it in the surgical site. And it's very important where you place it. You typically place it on the vertebrae, and you place it, now we have the clearance inside the spinal cage or, you know, on each side, right, before and after, on the front or in the back. And you have to trust that it stays there, right? Because to the extent that you believe that the bone graft will grow bone, well, then you know exactly where you want the bone growth to be. And you have to trust that it's there. There are many products out there that what's called irrigation, they dissolve. And that's why I demonstrated at the Pensa. I dropped it in a glass of water. Luckily it went fine, and it actually stayed there. But it's a good example of if it starts to dissolve, and there are products, even good products, that are known for dissolving, right? Or maybe more like toothpaste running. Well, if that happens, what you end up with is you don't get the bone growth where you want it to happen, but you may even get bone growth where you don't want it to happen, right? So I think handling is very hard to prove clinically. That's not really possible. But if a surgeon has trust and confidence that when they place the bone graft, it stays there and it grows bone. And by the way, it's also very efficient because you don't have to, if it starts to dissolve, bring out more bone graft and mix it again, right? Then it actually means a lot. And it's quite often a highly overlooked element of why surgeons are choosing products, right? To the extent that it works well, efficiently, intraoperatively, that is very important to surgeons. And this is what we consistently hear on the product.
Let's turn to financials a bit. You released some guidance. There will be a substantial OpEx reduction now when your sales of cranial products will cease. And you also gave guidance that in medium term you will have sales of 150 to 200 million SEK. Yeah. And at that time you will be cash flow positive. My first question is, in OssDsign's world, what is medium term?
Yeah, well, you know, we write medium term for a particular reason, right? And that's simply because there are still many things that can change. We're still early in the time point, right? I would say it's more than 1 year and it's below 5 years, right? Mm-hmm. But we want to keep that range because it is still so early days, and as you can see, there's lots of movement and it's difficult to quantify, right? If things go really well and the new clearance has a profound impact on our ability to get into hospitals and being used more, well then clearly you're going to see an acceleration that would bring you into the earlier part of that range. From what we can see right now, we take a more conservative view on it, right? And we like to stay conservative on it. So yes, this is how we see things.
Sort of my final question here is once again turning back to R&D. I mean, this is a highly innovative, fast-growing product, and it would probably need more, let's call it, R&D support beyond Top Fusion and Propel. What do your company foresee as R&D efforts in let's say, once again, in let's say medium or a bit longer term?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're referring to Top Fusion, and that's obviously our clinical programs, right? I think R&D is a really good example, where actually a real example where we've seen that having cranial is actually holding us back, because it's tying up cost in the company, it's tying up time in the company, that hasn't allowed us to maybe accelerate as we would have liked to do on R&D. So that is clearly one of the areas where, when we become a pure player of a biologic company, suddenly we're also opening up a path to accelerate on our R&D development. I would say there are a number of things you can pursue. There are some hygiene products, I would call them almost, which is just, you know, formulations of your bone graft that you need to deliver in various shapes and form. Right now we have a potty, which is the syringe version. There are some other ones that we clearly need to have. Then you can go for new indications. We actually cleared for more than where we used. I think what we got on Monday is certainly the crown jewel of any indication you can be given by the FDA, right? So we're not going to get a better indication than that, but there could be other things. I think it's still early. We have a plan for competitive reasons. Of course, we don't want to say exactly what we plan to develop, but we do plan to develop, and we do plan to accelerate it as soon as we have the time and the cash available to do that, right? Not meaning that burn rate is going to go up or anything of that nature, but simply just because by not having cranial, that just handcuffs us in certain ways from mobilizing as aggressively on R&D as we would have liked to.
Basically, this finishes my questions. Is there something you want to add, Morten, while you're here at the studio? Something we haven't touched upon?
No, I think I hope everyone understands the transformation that has happened in OssDsign over the last 3 years, or ever since the company was founded or even IPO'd, right? Because what we're drawing up from 24 is just a substantially different company, right? It is a company that is fully scalable, targeting standard practices, very high focus or sole focus even on the US market, right? And then it is a focused company, right? But focused on a very big commercial potential, which has been validated, still early days, right? But by the fact of our sales trajectory, from our new FDA interbody clearance, from the feedback we're getting, right? So I think we're on a really, really good journey, and certainly the OssDsign moving forward will be very different from the OssDsign in the past, with a very different, I would say, opportunity and a very different profitability profile.
Thank you very much for a very good presentation of the company, and once again, congratulations on a successful direct-to-share issue.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you for having me.